This short video is to introduce you to the new brushes in the Faces pack that are for ParticleShop, which is an Adobe Photoshop plugin. These brushes in Faces, there are 15 of them, and each of them are made to be used with characters or creatures or anything based on kind of a face, basically. But that's not to say they're limited to that. You're really limited to only what your imagination can come up with. Before I start showing each of the individual brushes, I would like to go over just the options panel up here. You can reset the entire tool here. You can turn on the pressure to change the size of the brush. You can change the size of the brush manually. You can turn on the pressure to change the opacity of the brush, which you can also change manually. You can increase the count of the particles being used. You can also undo, redo, and reset the whole canvas that you're working with. I also like to have the color wheel visible to me at all times, so I will open it here and then I will pin it so that it stays open with all my brushes and I can change things on the fly. You can, of course, erase, smudge. You can pick colors from your canvas here. So without a lot of extra talk, I want to go through each of these brushes, and we'll start with Chapped. I'm not going to really be changing anything in their properties unless they're difficult to see, though I will change the color a little bit. And these brushes are meant to really kind of be rather subtle brushes. Each little speckle that you can see is putting down a stroke. I'll change a little bit the opacity on this one to show just a little better what it's doing. Change the color. This is basically a skin brush that interacts with what is already on the canvas or on the layer and bleeds a little bit into it, but also adds a rather rough surface texture with it. We'll undo, reset the canvas, and we'll move to Cosmetic. This is more type of adding some color somewhere. It's directionally driven. You can see how it kind of follows the path of the brush as we go around. Again, usually the default of a low opacity will work best for you as you subtly color areas of a face. The next brush we have is Eyebrows. It's pretty self-explanatory. You can make shaggy eyebrows. You could make a whole unibrow if you wanted. It's a fun brush. It again follows the direction that you paint with and is a useful brush. You can use it for beards. You can use it for all sorts of things. So we'll clear that off. Move to the next brush, which is Fake Eyelashes. They're a little bit rough fake eyelashes, but you could make and use them to help accentuate the eyes in a character that you are working on. Clear that off. Move to Freckles. And Freckles does just what it says it does. Freckles down. You can use them usually at a quite soft opacity. The subtlety is often much nicer than just blowing them out at full opacity, but then it's up to you, of course. Next one is Makeup, which is just what it sounds like. If you need to add some makeup, some eyeshadow, some rouge, some lipstick, maybe use it to add chickenpox. Anyway, it is a really big brush. Low opacities work well with it. It will blend nicely with underneath colors. I encourage you to experiment with it. The next brush is Road Rash. Kind of what would happen to you if you fell and hit the pavement on your rollerblades or skateboard. It's really a very nice texture brush. You can use it for a lot of different things. So that is Road Rash. Rough Skin. This is a brush that will blend some with the underlying color. Again, one that would be best served using lower opacities. so that it'll blend very nicely with what's underneath. You can change the color. Of course, you can change all sorts of things about this brush. And as you build it up, it will start to look like a rough skin texture. So probably more appropriate for a male face, something like that. This is the Shaggy Brow brush. So it's kind of like the eyebrows, but a whole lot more shaggy. Good for beards if you want. A lot of different ways to use these kinds of brushes. You can use them for fur on animals. It's just the potential's unlimited. The next brush is skin, and this is a brush that, again, at lower opacities will look nicer, and it is to add a kind of a realistic skin texture when you need one, or to accentuate skin texture. So often we see skin textures smoothed out so much that they don't really look representative of reality. So this is a nice brush to use to get a more realistic skin texture going. The next brush is smoothing, and this is a brush that picks up and will blend with the colors underneath. So you can see it's blending nicely with what's under it. You can get some very nice smooth transitions from one color to the next. And stubble, this is definitely not meant to be done in yellow. It is a brush for building 5 o'clock shadow. This is way too big, so we'll lower it, and that's way too small. So you'll find somewhere that's just right. Probably using some opacity is a good thing. Most of these brushes, again, I like the opacities to be really quite low to make them work well. You may even want to increase the count of the speckles with this brush. The next one is stubble 2, which is kind of more of the same, but it's a little rougher. So if we make it smaller and increase the count, you can see what it does here. And the stubble's a little bit longer than stubble 1. Clear that, move on to the next one, stubble 3, and this is the thickest, longest, shaggiest of the bunch. Move it down a little bit so you can see. These could be used for all sorts of things besides just beards. You could use them anywhere you needed some extra texture. You could use them to give somebody a buzz haircut. All sorts of ways to use these brushes. And again, I want to emphasize that it is mostly limited only by your imagination. And the last brush is veins. And this is just an interesting brush because it paints these kind of veiny structures. This would be a brush, it looks like a flowing river of blood in some ways. You would use at very low opacities on a layer to add these veiny looking, or if you change their color, maybe even hairy looking pieces into your image. This is probably my favorite brush of the bunch. That's it. That is the Faces brush pack for ParticleShop plugin by Painter. I encourage you to give it a try, experiment with it, use it in your work, and get some interesting things happening.